I think it's thinking, so just a minute. All right, and let me share this. I always wish you could you could preset this up before you go live.
Yay, it looks like we're live.
Yeah, there we go.
It's so exciting.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our February book club. Tonight, I'm here with Susanna Barkataki, author of Embracing Yoga's Roots, Courageous Ways to Deepen Your Yoga Practice. I'm so happy to have you here. I've been fangirling on you for a while, and it's such a pleasure to have you here this evening to talk all things yoga and your book.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, anyone who is watching on Zoom, you can drop questions in the chat box, or if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I will try to monitor those as we go this evening. But welcome, everyone. All right. So, Susanna, let's maybe just start with a little bit of your background and who you are, where you are, what you do, and how you came to write this book.
Yeah. I feel like my whole life prepared me to write this book. It was probably something that was like 20 years in the making, and really in a way my whole life, because my father is from Assam in the northeast of India, and my mom is British. And I was born in England, but growing up there was a lot of discrimination against mixed race and Indian and Pakistani families. And so we moved to the United States, which is why I sound like I do, kind of more like a Valley girl than like someone from England or India. And yet, even when we moved to Los Angeles, we experienced, my brother and I in particular, and then my father as well, experienced a lot of discrimination still. And so I was really confused in that way of like, people might be able to relate if there's ways that you were different than your classmates or things that kind of marked you off from others. I was really confused about who I was. I didn't feel like I belonged in the United States. I didn't feel like I belonged fully in India or England. And I was just really, really lost and confused. And that place of struggle led me to a lot of self-inquiry, a lot of trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing in the world. And like many of us, perhaps, for different reasons, I think the doorway into a spiritual practice or a yoga practice can sometimes be suffering. It could be physical suffering, could be emotional, mental suffering. And for me, it was like this double thing of I've tried to be as American as possible. And the very things that I was learning at home, like meditation, mantra, mudra, that were actually helping like my stress or my anxiety or my shyness, were the things that I was getting made fun of at school or in the community. And so it took until I was a young adult, like in my early 20s, where I realized, oh, like is trying to run away from who I am, like my ancestry, my past, my roots isn't actually the solution. I need to embrace them and turn towards them. And so that began a whole different period of my life where I moved to India and studied with a number of different teachers and really turned back to the practice of yoga that so many of us love. And then when I moved back to the United States as a teacher, a high school teacher, I wanted to find other places to practice. I was living in LA, and nowhere that I could find was teaching anything like what the teachers in India had taught me. And so I thought, oh, there's something going on here. There's some disconnect between what I know yoga is and what my family has taught me and teachers have taught me and what we're seeing in the West. And it at first was very confusing, but slowly I started to kind of unpack the threads and the historical things and the social themes that had led us to where we were. And then to write about, well, instead of being satisfied with this watered down yoga, let's explore what's available to us, that's been practiced for thousands of years.
Yeah. And so what is it that you were finding those studios were lacking here in the West?
Yeah. And, this isn't, I want to say, like, I don't say this out of judgment, I guess, of studio spaces. Like, I think a lot of times people just don't know better. And even,
Mhm.
power yoga or like booty fit
Yeah.
yoga or whatever, all these things
Yep.
that we might
Yep.
go to, um, it actually does, it can open a door and it can feel good. So I'm not saying this to shame or blame anyone. It's more like a trend that I was seeing where, yoga is the whole eightfold path. It's like,
Mhm.
it's the yamas and niyamas. There, in fact, it's actually beyond the eightfold path, but we have from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras these 8 steps or 8 kind of pillars of what yoga is: yoga ethics, out with one another, personal, the niyamas, asana, the physical practice, which means to take a firm and comfortable seat. So it's actually less about like getting
Right.
like a workout than it is about moving the body in a way to be at ease for pranayama, which is life, working with the life force, breath, pratyahara, sensory focus, um, dharana, which is like mindfulness, and dhyana, which is meditation, and then samadhi, which is bliss and the cultivation of like pure liberation, personal and then interpersonal liberation. So I didn't see actually much of any of that. I saw asana, but
Mhm.
asana detached from the aim of like a firm, steady, comfortable seat, asana that was actually disconnecting people from their bodies, or honestly creating a lot of injury. And many folks, including myself, I'm short, I'm like a curvy woman, like I
Mhm.
don't fit into the yoga clothes that
Yep.
are sold in the studios. I didn't feel like I belonged. And I think many of us can relate to that. Is like what I saw was this hyper physically focused, kind of very normative fitness culture, which is almost the opposite of what yoga is. None of the
Right.
teachers that I had cared what they or we looked like. Many of them have all, sorts of body shapes and sizes, the teachers that I was studying with. And the yoga they were teaching, yes, it was building strength in the body, but it was more and flexibility too, but more for moving into the other limbs of yoga as well.
Mhm.
I'm curious
Yeah.
your experience with that
Well,
in Minnesota.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have been doing yoga uh, 25 years, maybe. Like college is about when I was exposed to it. And back then it was strictly just the asana. But I will say my teachers were incorporating it. I just didn't know it or understand it at that time. I just thought yoga was exercise.
Yeah.
And then as I began to work more closely with a teacher, she became a good friend of mine and really started to help me understand. And I was like, oh, okay. And I actually didn't get my teacher training until 2020. I took the opportunity of COVID to take advantage of online teacher training because up till that point, I just hadn't had the time to commit to doing, multiple weekends for teacher
Mm-hmm.
training. Um, and it's so interesting because even I now live in a plus size body, but back then I was thin, but I still had a large chest.
Yeah.
And I remember going into like low lunge and I put both hands inside my knees because one on each side, there's a whole lot of stuff in the way.
Yeah.
So I remember the teacher coming up to me and being like, why do you keep doing that? And I was like,
Mm.
because these got in the way. And she was like,
Yeah.
I never thought about, because she,
Didn't
was
have that
was
body.
thin
Yeah.
and didn't have that body.
Yeah.
And that's always stuck with me, that
Mm.
experience.
Mm.
And now living in a plus size body, there's a whole lot more stuff that can, get in the way.
Mm.
Um, but it really makes it, I feel like I'm a better teacher because of it.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I'm much more aware. I do a lot of chair yoga with my community, just
Mm,
slow, gentle, connecting with our breath.
mm,
Um, because a lot of people in my community can't, I work a lot with the brain injury community, and
mhm.
they just simply can't do big poses or inversions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful, Amy. I feel like, the heart of yoga, when I think about it, and my particular teacher, Shankarji, who I learned with in Bihar, he was teaching villagers and he was teaching anyone who wanted to learn yoga. And this might not sound revolutionary, but it is, because in India, because of Brahminical patriarchy and the caste system, for a long time, outcast folks or lower caste folks were not allowed or didn't have access to, or were even punished for teaching or learning, or even saying mantra, which is, when you think about it, it's like just another form of oppression.
Mhm.
It's really terrible. And so he was teaching to anyone, including villagers, and so he's kind of in a way, breaking with tradition, a radical, but his whole thing is, this is not radical. This is what yoga is. Yoga is about practicing non-harm. Yoga is about liberation for all. And so what he said to me after, I lived with him for about 2 years, not with him, but like in the spiritual place that we were, in the school that we were, and studying with him, was, go back to your world, go back to the United States and bring these teachings wherever they are most needed, and to the people who could benefit from them, which truly we know, or anyone who's experienced yoga and is already a practitioner,
Mhm.
anyone can benefit from yoga. And yet, if you just look at kind of normative studio culture, who's missing? People with traumatic brain injuries, veterans, plus
Yeah.
size bodied folks, younger people, older people. My aunts and uncles, they always say to me, because they know I teach yoga, they're like, Beta, child, I can't go to a yoga studio. My aunt wears a sari all the time. That's all she will wear is a sari. And in India, women practice in saris all the time. But
Mhm.
here she would feel out of place. And so
Yeah.
it's like, how, to me, embracing the roots of yoga is making it accessible and bringing it to the communities that can benefit.
Mm-hmm. And you just brought up something so beautiful, that everybody should learn yoga. Everybody should be able to teach and do yoga. Um, and I'd love to kind of get into this discussion with you, because I recently, I try to pause and take a moment and step back, because I am a white cisgendered woman, right, living in this world. And I always try to pause and reflect and, like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Um, and I had been reading some articles written by white yoga instructors and how they had decided to stop teaching yoga
Mm,
because they felt it wasn't their place. And that really made me pause. I'm like, wait, because I had just gone through my teacher training. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I'm like, wait, but no, like, it's
mm,
supposed to be for everybody. I
mm.
need to make sure I'm making it accessible to everybody. Um, what do you feel in that regard?
Yes, I love this question. And people ask me this a lot, which really is like, should white people be teaching yoga? And at the end of the day, I will always say this. No one can answer that but you, right? Like, so what I say, I'll give you my thoughts and my opinions, but at the end of the day, only you, and you, Amy, and you, whoever's listening, or listens to the replay, like, only you know in your soul and your heart what is right action. So the way I look at it is, it has to be taken in a context of like cultural care, right? And cultural relationship. So yoga is a practice that's been here for thousands of years. It's written about in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in the Mahabharata, and in depth, in real detail in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So it's in the spiritual texts and the practitioner texts of the Vedas, which comes from a place and a people, which is South Asia, and particularly India and what's now Pakistan. And then it was practiced for thousands of years, passed down from teacher to student and teacher to student, not all in one homogenous stream. It's not like it was just like one thing, like, this is the way to practice yoga. It's a weaving web with different, people who thought this was the way to liberation and people who thought this was the way. people who said, oh, we will teach women, other people who said we will not teach women. It's like there's been a diversity of ways that yoga has been practiced, but all these thousands of years primarily taught by brown people, and perhaps also influenced by Northeast Africa and the trade that was happening, in the time of like trade between India and Phoenicia and India and Northeast Africa, also perhaps influence particularly with Africa as well. And so I would say, it's a practice that's been here for thousands of years, practiced by primarily brown and also Black people. So when you look at that and then you bring it over, it's very recent in the West. Yes, Indians brought yoga to the West, like Swami Vivekananda, who's I'm also training and take classes in Swami Vivekananda's lineage. One of the oldest yoga lineages that, as well as the Shankaracharya lineage. So it's like there's a history and a context. And then when we look around at yoga in the West, why don't we see, the kind of expansiveness of the yoga that these teachers like Shankaracharya or, Vivekananda, what they were teaching? They were not just teaching asana or workouts, they were teaching the whole 8 limbs and more. And then 2, why do we not see brown and Black teachers primarily, right? So I bring that all up to say there's a context that we're in. And so when you ask a question of me and my positionality as a white person, if you're white, is like, should I be teaching yoga? Well, maybe consider the context. And so how can you, in that context, practice in a way that shows more appreciation than appropriation or oppression even, right? Because it could be edging out another person or person of color or culture, like someone who comes from a history and a lineage of yoga, from being able to teach. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't teach entirely, because there's also, I think, there's real individual uniqueness, right? And there's people who can only learn what they're going to learn about yoga from you. Like there's no one else they're going to learn it from. Like you are going to be their teacher, their first teacher, their 10th teacher. Like you're going to be the one. And so the way I look at it is like, my hope is honestly, and this is just me personally, right? Like ultimately you decide, but for more and more conscious people, right? White folks, people of color, to just be conscious and respectful and aware of that cultural landscape and of the positionality they hold, so they can bring more people to the heart and the depth of yoga itself and create more space for teachers of color and teachers of culture to be able to share their wisdom too. So it's not an either or for me. It's not like no white teachers should teach, that's not how I personally feel. I run teacher trainings. I run interracial teacher trainings. They're mixed race, meaning I specifically make sure the training is majority folks of color, because part of my vision is to change the demographic of yoga in the West, but I also train white folks because I think we need conscious white folks who are going to walk into those,
100%.
studios, spaces that I can't, and be like, hey, consider this, what about this? And so we can work together.
Yeah. Well said. And I appreciate your thoughtfulness on that. You did mention one thing that I do want to get into is appropriation versus appreciation.
Yeah.
And I know I was taking courses from Diane Bondi and Amber Carnes, and they brought up how they stopped saying namaste at the end of class. And I was like, okay, this is new to me. Why are we doing this? And they took the time to explain it. And I was like, okay, I get it. And it's something that your teacher taught their teacher, that, it just keeps cycling down, and everybody just uses it. And it's a beautiful word, it's beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about appropriation versus appreciation and the use of namaste.
Yeah. So cultural appropriation involves 2 things, and I break this down in depth in the book, but it's power, right? And we talked a little about power already, power imbalance and harm. And so by power imbalance, we're talking about systemic power, like the way I show up in the world as a woman. I've experienced gender-based discrimination through my working life, through my career, as a student, based on gender, right? So that doesn't mean I am less powerful than other men in my life, but systemically, structurally, I've been paid less, I've been treated differently, gotten less ability to move up in the workforce because of my gender, right? And so many of us may look at these things and say, aha, I see that, like discrimination based on race, gender, sexual orientations, a whole, range of things. But that's what we mean when we talk about power imbalance, right? So there's a differential of power structurally. And then the second is harm. And so when we're looking at yoga, there's a differential of power in the West because the power structure, the biggest yoga organizations are run by white folks. Biggest yoga companies are run by white folks. And so yet yoga comes from a culture of color from India, and then harm. So that culture that yoga comes from has certain practices, certain values, certain belief systems, and things that are harmful, things that are disrespectful. Like, for example, and this is going to connect to Namaste as well, in Indian culture, when I see an elder or someone who, a teacher or someone who I respect, I often would place my hands like this, in the familiar Anjali Mudra, and bow and say Namaste or Namaskar, and reach for their feet, because it's like a way of saying I'm going to give respect, and also like kind of humbly let you know that I am submitting myself to you as my elder, as my teacher. And often the elder would like lift you up before you can touch their feet. It's like it's okay, child, it's okay, but when you have something like Namaste used out of context, like on a t-shirt, like Namaste in bed, or, Namaste, or these things, then it takes a word that's like, it's so respectful. Like it carries this, I don't know how to explain it. It's hard in a culture that may not understand or have those same things, but like, we wouldn't put Jesus like on a toilet seat. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
like things that we respect so
Well,
much of
some
the
might, but
yeah, some might, but yeah. And so with appropriation, it's when someone from the dominant culture takes something from a target culture, or kind of less powerful culture, and then without relationship with that culture, without understanding, or even in defiance of, even if they understand, and then profits off it at the detriment of the person or people from the source culture, right? So I'll give a couple concrete examples because it sounds a little abstract, but it's really like power, harm, right? It's pretty clear. And so even at the end of this conversation, folks can leave it being like, oh, I can identify cultural appropriation, and I can identify how to appreciate as well. Like they work really simply together, or maybe like simply, but not easily. And so, for example, like the Om symbol, the Om that's written like this, it's got a little, I'm like drawing it in the air, but I'll draw it on a piece of paper, or you can look up Om. So it's a sacred symbol. It's one of the most sacred. It's again written about in the Upanishads, in the Vedas. It's described in Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, as a form of connection with the divine, and as a real useful tool for meditation. So when that symbol is used, I've seen studios paint the Om symbol on like yoga mats, or on the floor on a parking space. That's like taking the divine and putting it, because there's a lot of association of things on the floor with not being as respected in Indian culture. And so it's something where, like, when my family sees that, they're like, oh, I don't understand. Why would they do that? Like, do they not realize this is valuable and sacred and holy to us? So that is an example where it's like disrespect. And then cultural appropriation, where there's material harm, would be like someone going to India, taking like a jewelry design, say of Om, or other deities, not paying the artisans for those designs, or being in
Mm-hmm.
relationship with them, but coming back to the West and creating their own jewelry line and selling it for like 80, 150,
Right.
$150, which happens. And
Yeah.
those jewelry companies, like I've met with some of them where they want to learn how to do better. It's not that hard to do a little better, like give some percentage back, to the culture that you're taking from. But some of them are not, interested in doing that. So that's cultural appropriation. Before we get into appreciation, any questions? And I'll talk about Namaste more in a second. There's just so much.
No, and
Yeah.
I think this is a great conversation because I believe when people know better, they do better.
Mm,
And, you know, I'm guilty, right? Like of just doing things that I've seen others do and not giving it a second thought. And
mm,
then once it's brought to my attention, it's like, oh, hold on, why am I doing this? Right?
mm,
Like I wore a t-shirt that said namaste in bed all day. I'm guilty. I got rid of it. I got rid of it.
yeah.
Um, so yes, continue, please.
Yeah. So I'll finish out cultural appropriation and appreciation and then talk about namaste. So appreciation is literally the flip side of appropriation, where you have power imbalance and harm. Appreciation is equalizing power, or working to utilize your power to uplift. And then the opposite of harm is ahimsa, right? So it's like a kind of reverence and respect and being in um, kind of right relationship with yoga and with the people that yoga comes from as much as you can. And so in the example of the jewelry line, right? These are deities, sacred deities. And so it might be really powerful for that jeweler to have a designer from India make the designs, or to at least write the stories about who these are, how to treat them, how to wear that jewelry with respect. Also for the company to give a portion of the proceeds back to the communities or the artisans that they're benefiting from. And in another way, I'm thinking of, like, for example, with Om, it's like learning about being in relationship with people or culture, the culture that the practice comes from. And so if you don't have to go that far to find out, like, it's disrespectful to put sacred things on the floor, close to the floor. And so then learning that and just saying, okay, I really love I'm building my own relationship with it, and I can respect that in the culture it comes from. This would be kept up, higher or flipped around, because I've also seen studios that like display it all different ways, like upside down or back to front. And that,
Mm,
there's a power in the language. It's a vibrational language. And so Sanskrit, and the language that yoga comes to us through. And so there's so much to learn. We could actually spend our whole lives learning and not scratch the surface of
yeah.
all that there is to learn about yoga, or even about Sanskrit. So when you come to Namaste, um, here it is strange that this word, that traditionally in India, it's a greeting. It's like it literally translates namas, tubhyam. It's like bow to you. There's no I literally in the word namaste. And it's a very like ephemeral feeling, like bow to you out of respect. But it's always a greeting. It's not a leave taking. It's not a goodbye. And so in most of India. And so when people from within the tradition, within yoga culture, like Indian culture, hear namaste at the end of class, it's really jarring. It's kind of like, I don't understand. Why are we saying hello when we're ending? And so the thing I like to ask people is, what's your intention? Why are you saying namaste? Is it because your teachers said it? Is it
Mhm.
because it somehow lends, because, a little air of exotification, like, oh, I am this wise teacher and I've imparted what I need to impart to you, and now we're done, and you can go on with your day. And is it really just a way to get people out of the room because that's what they're used to? And so to interrupt those patterns those habitual patterns. And so I actually I don't tell people not to say it, right? I more say, really inquire within, is it appropriate for you? And is it the way you want to end your class? The reason I say that is I wrote and talked about Namaste a lot for a couple of years. And then I got a couple of people from Nepal writing me saying, Miss, we say Namaste to say goodbye. So I don't know what you're talking about, that it's a greeting, because for us, it's also a closing. I was like, oh, yes. There's so much diversity, right? There's so much diversity in Indian culture, Nepalese culture, Pakistani culture, Sri Lankan culture. There's people who have all different kinds of practices. And so I realized, okay, there's not one way to do this, but it's this strange thing where it's like what got imported to the West is asana and namaste. And so what are we doing with that? Is it really serving our intentions? And is there a more appropriate way that that we can close our class? Like particularly for me, my teacher always ended with Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, or like a closing mantra. And so I close with Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so it can kind of be considered like aloha, like
Mm,
a goodbye or a hello in some places. But I was, even if you Google namaste, like the dictionary says it's like the light in me honors the light in you,
yeah.
which is beautiful, right?
It's
Like
beautiful.
beautiful. But not necessarily
It's not what it
correct.
means. Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
I
not that.
understand why so many people use it. And that's why like conversations like this are so important.
Mm,
Because like I said, when you know better, you do better.
yeah.
And I've just kind of stopped using it completely.
Mm,
Um, just because I'm like, okay, I don't know how to properly use this, so I shouldn't be using it.
mm,
Um, and let's talk about Om for a moment.
mm,
Um, I do like to close my class with Om.
mm,
I invite everyone, to do breath with me and do an Om. And the vibration of Om, right? And that's
mm,
sort of the intention behind Om, is that it is like this vibration of the universe.
mm,
And so I appreciate how you said use Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
mm.
Um, yeah. So what are your thoughts behind Om?
I have so many. You know, Om, it's it's more than just one sound. It's like four parts. It's
Mhm.
creation, preservation, and transformation. And then the whole sound together is like gone beyond time, space, form. And it's written about pretty extensively in BKS Iyengar's book, Light on Yoga, and some other places as well, also um, in the Yoga Sutras. And so for me, Om, my teachers would have us meditate on like the form of Om for a long time, and hold the image, hold like as a concentration practice, as a practice,
Mhm.
or first a dharana practice, then dhyana. So concentrating the mind, and then meditation practice, to be able to just hold, inhale Om, exhale Om, inhale Om, exhale Om. And so it's a traditional practice, and one that has been used for thousands of years. The Shanti mantras, the peace mantras, start with Om and often end with Om. So it's a deeply ingrained, in many teachers say it's the first sound of the universe, the first sound that was made, the ah, and then the oo and the So there's a lot of history there within yoga culture with the practice of Om. And so to bring that in, even if I'm not able to go into all that depth with my students, is to give them, in my
Mhm.
mind, an authentic taste, or move towards a more authentic experience of what yoga can be. Like you said, it's, got the vibrations. And I often will try to explain a bit about what Om is in certain contexts, if it's important, explain that it's not religious. Of course, for
Mhm.
people it is part of their
Right.
religion, but it itself is just a universal sound of unity and oneness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And another reason I personally like using Om is, again, I work with the brain injury community, and it
Mhm.
stimulates the vagus nerve,
Wow.
as do, you know, a lot of other chants. But that's why I think it's such a wonderful chant to use at the end, and um, stimulating that vagus nerve. That's my little
That's
hidden secret.
powerful. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many. And the ah is like when your mouth is open,
Mhm.
ah, you're kind of vibrating actually from the earth up through the belly, which is like the power of earth and water. And then ooh is in the chest and the heart,
Mhm.
which is like water and fire, and harmonizing those elements. And is in the mouth, the nasal cavity, and the brain. And so
Mhm.
you're there, that's air and space. And so we're also, when we chant Om, we're harmonizing all the elements in the body.
Yes.
There's so many, and what's amazing is the like rishis understood this, right? They understood like what we now call like modern neuroscience. They had different words, but they understood that these practices were working on us, mind, body, spirit, and working towards creating harmony.
Mhm. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that part up, the
Yeah.
different parts that it moves through as you say it. Yeah, it's powerful.
Mm.
So, Susanna, um, tell us a little bit more about how the book came to be
Mm.
and what your hope is with this book.
Yeah. Yeah, so I wrote this article that went viral in 2015. Mind
I
you,
know the
had been,
feeling.
yeah, I had been blogging for like a year and a half, and it was like crickets. Like my mom would write back, be like, "Nice article, Susanna." My best friend would write back and be like,
I love that.
"Yeah, like
Yay,
this
mom.
doesn't sound like you. Like, can you? I feel like you're trying to be something, you know?" And I was like, "Okay." So I kept writing. But this, I came back from a puja that my aunt had held, which is like a fire ceremony, a sacred ceremony. And I got home and opened up, my computer, and saw like another yoga festival, all white people, all, and I was just feeling so frustrated that what I knew yoga wasn't what was being represented. So I penned off this like furious kind of manifesto it was called How to Decolonize Your Yoga Practice. And I put it on my blog and hit publish, shared it to social, I think at that time, just Facebook, and went to sleep, right? And woke up the next day. And this is the first time that's in my life that strangers, like, I think there were like 50 reposts and like 500 comments. It was like, oh, this has hit a nerve.
It
And
hit a nerve.
yeah. And so then it just kept getting shared and shared. Now it's like, I don't even know how many, like 50,000 shares or something. It's like ridiculous. But I knew that that call of my heart was something that other people understood, like whether or not they had ever been really exposed to the more spiritual or deeper aspects of yoga, they could understand like, we're getting a bait and switch here. Like we're going to yoga, but we're not getting the depth of what it is. And so we deserve more. All of us deserve more. Yoga deserves more. And so with writing the book, which came like 5 years later, 4.5, 5 years later, it was really just like an uncovering of the themes that were in that first article of how did we get to where we are, right? The first
Mhm.
part is like, how did we get to this place of such separation? And then reflecting on our own parts. And then the third part is like moving towards interconnection, moving towards action. What can we do? And the fourth part is liberation, which really, when I look back at writing it, every single one of those parts could be its own book, but especially the fourth part, I barely got to scratch the surface. And so that I'm writing another book now that will be like much more elaboration on our personal practice and how we can connect our personal practice to support the world. But it was definitely a labor of telling the stories of my family, of going into my heart and my soul and just writing what was there. And then I'm a teacher, right? So also organizing it in a way that was like useful and usable. So yoga practitioners, I actually don't call myself a yogi, but I like each section is like yogis and power, or yogis and, you know, trauma informed yoga, for example. Or I knew people in the West, we refer to ourselves as yogis. In India, a yogi is like a realized master or a
Like a
renunciate.
guru.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I say I'm a student of yoga, but I wanted to address people here and now in a way that they would feel themselves kind of brought in to explore and ask questions. So I tried to also put a lot of reflection questions in there.
And I like that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that part.
And then move people through to like, this is not hopeless. This is actually really a hopeful place. Yoga has so much power. I believe with yoga, we can change the world. And so let's do it. You know, let's take action together and move towards personal and collective liberation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I think as we begin, I'm speaking as a white person, like it's okay to feel that discomfort.
Mm.
And, you know, like I'm always a little nervous, like, am I doing something wrong? Am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to do something wrong? And the answer is yes, we're always going to do something wrong, no matter who we are. But like I'm a very curious person, and I want to ask questions, and I want to understand the why behind what we do. And I think as white people, we need to become more curious. We need to like dig deeper and uncover those roots and where things come from. And we have to be uncomfortable sometimes. You know, I'm here in Minneapolis, you know, we're home of George Floyd.
Mm.
And that was a really uncomfortable period for a lot of people, but it also brought a lot of unity, and it brought people together. And you know, that's part of what yoga is all about too, right?
Mm.
Bringing us together.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's hard with, and this is like the challenge of doing this kind of work cross racially, but like George Floyd didn't want to bring anyone together. You know, he just wanted to live, right? And so there's this way,
Right.
as we're
We
learning.
wanted to breathe.
Yeah, yeah. And so as we're learning, especially in the places where, and I think about this as, you know, when I look at like gender-based equity work, like as a cis woman, right? I'm not trans, I'm not non-binary. As a non-Black person, like how can I be in the discomfort of, and honestly, a lot of it is the discomfort of like, when we live in privilege, we don't
Mhm.
know what we don't know. But people who live
Yeah.
in the oppression have to know, because their survival depends on understanding how these
Yeah.
systems work, right? So me as a woman, I understand how like the old boys club works, or like I understand how to stay safe, you know, not that it's my responsibility, right? I'm not saying but I do understand these systems, or I've worked to try to understand them, even in ways that aren't fair and that I shouldn't have to. And and so I think on the side where we do have privilege is like, when we move into a little bit more discomfort, it allows someone who's targeted to step perhaps into just slightly more space or slightly more ease. And so it isn't easy, right? It isn't. The work that I do, like, because I try to work really across, you know, across lines of difference and across, you know, culture and everything. And so I turn back to my practice. Like I know what it's like to hold, say, Virabhadrasana 2, hold Warrior 2, past the point where my leg muscles or even my arm muscles
Mhm.
are shaking. And so I know the tools that I can call on to build fortitude in those moments. And it's the same tools that I can use when I'm having a conversation with a trans colleague or a non-binary colleague who's like, hey, when you did this thing, I felt left out. Or when you talked about a goddess circle, you know, because I used to run those, I felt like you were essentializing gender, and that was painful for me. And even if in my
Mm,
heart I'm like, oh, I never meant to hurt you, and in my brain I'm like, but I wasn't trying to exclude. They don't
mhm.
need to hear that in that moment, right? Like what they need to
Right.
hear is, and what I need to do is, wow, like I'm really sorry I hurt you. Let me understand, maybe not even let me understand, because that puts the burden on them to explain to me. Uh,
Right.
but just being present with that moment and with that person. And so, so you're right. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I have found this kind of work to be so rewarding, because the depth of my relationships, it's so much more expansive, and I'm able to show up for people and be more kind of caring and compassionate. And also, like you said, like I do mess up, I make mistakes,
We're
this year
human.
already. Yeah, I've made
Hmm.
some mistakes, and so it's not in staying stuck in that, because perfectionism is a tool of white supremacy too, and just any kind of dominance,
Yeah.
culture of dominance. And so unpacking that and letting ourselves have the space, it's scary, it's hard, no one wants to be called out, but it's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Okay, people on the internet are mad for, a day, and then like, all right, we can move forward. Like, let's
Yeah.
keep doing the work, let's keep building real relationships.
And I think as white people, it's important for us to follow the work
Mm,
of people like you, Black and Brown women, and Indigenous women, and trans, non binary, queer folks. You know, if you want to start learning, you
mm,
need to immerse yourself in it a little bit and start following and observing and learning from.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, it is like kind of opening up. And I think people will find, not always, but a lot of the time, there is a real warmth and welcoming. Like if you show
Mhm.
that you're there and you're like really there and you kind of stick around, then it's like, oh, cool, you're part of the party, and we get to do this
Yeah.
work together, even across difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone has any questions for Susanna, please put them in the chat or in the comment if you're watching on Facebook, and we'll get to those. Otherwise, Susanna, what final words do you have for us? What final thoughts and words of wisdom?
Hmm. There's one section in the book that I was feeling like I wanted to read from. So give me a moment while I
Absolutely.
find that section. Oh yes, okay. So this is in the section on liberation, and it's after. I'll just show you, because I love that for folks who are looking. I love that I had help, even though I self-published. I had some really
I
skillful people,
love all your graphics.
yeah, like lay out the book. So it's
It's
and again, I'm
beautiful.
a teacher, so it's like tabbed. The sections are
Yes, I
tabbed. So
appreciate that
yeah,
so much.
yeah. And so Sri Adi Shankaracharya says, of all the instruments of emancipation, love is supreme. And this section ends with a little breath practice. Inherent in the practice of yoga is the work of creating unity of the small self with the greater self, unity of each individual with a greater whole. Yoga, Yujti Yoga, is defined as unity. And we move towards overcoming separation when we practice yoga as unity. We must lean back, embrace roots, and dismantle appropriation to move forward. And I'm going to skip a little and just say, with yoga, unity is right here. It's always within. The beauty is that everyone can connect to it. We all have this within us. No one need be left out. It's available to all. Just ask and yoga will speak to you. If we want yoga, union, we cannot run from what it means to truly practice yoga. Yoga is union. If we can breathe, we can do yoga. If we can feel, we represent liberation. And when we breathe together, we all get a little more free. Breathe in this future with me, breathe out, and let's make it happen together. And so that's the practice of like
Yeah.
literally, you have an individual relationship with yoga. Each one of us does. It didn't come to one, prophet. It came through to humanity, yoga as a practice. And so we each can speak to yoga. We each can be a vessel for yoga. And so in your way, what helps you do that? What invites you into a practice of being in unity? For me right now, just to take it out of like this abstract thing, it's like, it's really being present with my child. I have a 9-year-old. And so it's like, how can I see this being for who they're becoming and guide them, and support them, but not squash them, right? Like not squash their spirit. So much of yoga as unity is this practice. It's with my friends. It's with my family who I recently moved to live near. It's with my students. And so it's engaged in life. It's not just separate in like an abstract practice. It's really engaged in the world. So I'd invite you to explore, how can you live yoga as unity?
We just got a beautiful comment from Laura. She wrote, I've gotten a little lost as I'm having trouble finding yoga studios near me that honor and respect yoga, but your talk has reignited my desire to look for the right place. Do you have thoughts on how to find a studio?
Wow, Laura, I love this question. And I can say I'm in the same boat actually, because I just moved and I'm looking for places to practice. So I would say two things. One is there's a whole wonderful resource now online of a lot of amazing practitioners. And so you can find, and so I'll talk about in person in a second, but online, if you want to practice with like, body positive yoga teachers, there's Amber Carnes, there's Jessamine Stanley, there's just so many wonderful practitioners. Accessible Yoga organization has so many accessible yoga teachers. If you're looking to go deeper into like yoga's roots, then you've got ABCD Yogi or Tejal Yoga. There's just so many. And I can share a resource page because I have a Google Doc with a lot of these links on it, because I'm saying a lot of names that if you want, if that's helpful, I can share that. But and then in person for me, I'll just be honest, it's trickier, right? Like it's hard sometimes to walk into a space and like check it out if I feel like I'm going to be treated a certain way or looked at a certain way, or I'm not going to be able to keep up, or whatever the thing is that's in my head. And I look on the website and I try to kind of get a sense. So if there's a lot of words like booty sculpt or body pump or, those type of things, it's likely going to be a place that I'm not going to feel as connected. But if there's words like yoga for all, or, they have language, or they mention trauma-informed yoga, or they mention connecting to yoga's roots, or they have like a beginner series, right? Then I feel like that's a studio that nowhere is perfect, right? But they're working perhaps towards a more inclusive and more culturally connected practice. And so it's really just kind of trial and error. Laura, where are you in the world? Because there's also like, it would be so great. Some of my students do these projects where they build up networks, right? But none of them have gotten to the point of publishing them yet, but building up networks of amazing studios and spaces. I'm near Minneapolis. Okay. To the suburbs.
All the great
Where's
places are in the
Amber?
city. What?
Where's Amber Carnes? Is she not?
She's Maryland.
She's Maryland.
Yeah.
Who's in
But
I
know we
don't
have
know.
we have soul yoga, but again, that's in Minneapolis.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, Laura, if this is something you could do, but like the other thing would be maybe explore, is there a Gurdwara, a Sikh temple, or is there a Hindu temple? It may or may not be comfortable for you to go, but often like a Hindu temple will have yoga classes, and there'll be asana classes, and there'll be meditation, and they'll have kind of more of the roots. So it's something where you could go and you could ask. They'll have Sanskrit classes if you're interested in that. and they're very welcoming. Like most temple spaces, you don't have to be, and they're not going to convert you, right? You can't, like, Hinduism is not a converting religion. And so they're universalist in that sense of welcoming all. So if you were comfortable with that, that's one thing that you could try. And then maybe just reaching out to community, or eventually create it yourself. I don't know if you're a teacher, but yeah, I just want to say you're not alone. Like, I'm in the same boat. I haven't actually tried. I've looked online and then got discouraged. So I'm going to try again now, because you're inspiring me to do that. So I hope you find a place that feels like home. And it may be, someone's doing classes or workshops in their backyard, or in, their upstairs.
Yeah.
Like that. Those are I look for kind of the unusual places.
Yeah.
Spaces, parks, that's honestly where I've felt most comfortable over the decades of practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're so right. Like, people start really small. They just start with a small group of people, like you said, in their backyard. So
yeah.
And I love your thoughts about finding a temple near you. I have one right here in my town, and you've inspired me to go check it out.
Yeah.
I would love to learn Sanskrit. Like, I struggle with it. And I would really love to learn it. And that's a great place to look to.
It is. Yeah. And often temples will have delicious food, and it'll all be just, written in, depending on what kind of temple. Like, it might be a South Indian language, it might be Devanagari, Hindi, Sanskrit are from the same root of Devanagari. But you can go in and people will be, in general, really warm and really welcoming and happy to have you there. And so kind of suspending that disconnection, or feeling like, oh, I don't fit in here. But one thing I will say, if you go to a temple, like I'm wearing bare shoulders, I wouldn't wear this in a temple, right? So cover your, just again, out of respect, you want to wear like a long sleeve shirt, or like cap shirt, not shorts. Like if you're going to a holy place, so so those are just good things to know. And then other than that, generally you'll just be able to have a unique cultural experience. And some temples do have amazing educational programs.
Yeah, I'm excited now to go check that out. Well, Susanna, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been such a great conversation, just such an important conversation. And thank you for all the work that you do. I love following you on Instagram, and your reels. I love your reels.
They're really fun. I really like, I see it as edutainment, and my brain just thinks about, like, how can we take this tricky thing and then share it in a way that, like, gets people to maybe laugh, or maybe be like, huh, and then think about it.
Yeah. And you're just so authentic in them. And your Instagram is just Susanna Barkataki, correct?
Yeah, it's Susanna Barkataki. Yeah, my name.
And so for everyone, for book club for next month, for March, our book is Radiant Rest. Yeah. Yoga Nidra for deep relaxation and awakened clarity with Tracy Stanley. So don't walk, run to get this book. Oh, and she's such a beautiful soul. So I can't wait to have her next month. I don't have my calendar flipped. I think it's March 28th, but don't quote me. I have to look that one up. But we'll be here live with her next month. But Susanna, thank you so much. This has just been really lovely getting to chat with you today.
Yes, thank you so much. And so much gratitude to you and to the whole community. To see you again at some point.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Have a great night, everyone.